welcome everybody. My name is Will Thomas. I'm here with Legal Shield. Just wanted to actually thank Jessica and SSB Bank for actually having us here. My job is pretty easy today. It's to actually just show you a benefit that SSB Bank is actually going to be offering as a service and how you can actually take advantage of it. In addition to that, I'll be able to give you some tips and different ways you can protect yourself from identity theft. Fair?
Yeah.
All right, absolutely. So, some quick facts about identity theft. There have been over 16 million victims of identity theft last year alone. The revenue from it has actually surpassed that of drug trafficking. The common reactions are usually those of frustration, anxiety, violation, fear, feeling vulnerable. Anyone ever felt vulnerable before?
Mm-hmm.
Yes or yes? And anger. You know, I would be upset if my identity were stolen or if I had to actually spend time restoring everything. Over 1 billion sensitive records have been comprised through data breaches since 2005. A good thing to use is privacyrights.org. This has actually been compiled by the government and actually gives you good information in regards to the breaches that happen, as well as different things regarding them. So, some notable breaches. Yahoo, there have been 3 billion accounts that were compromised. Deeproot. Anthem is actually one of the biggest health providers in the US, 80 million identities. 14 million with Verizon, as well as Equifax, had 145 million. That is the biggest that has happened. Even though the numbers are not the same, the Equifax one is the one that actually affects all of us, because we're talking about social security numbers, driver's license numbers, addresses, email addresses, pretty much all the personal information that you usually want to keep personal. So, I'm clairvoyant, I'm telling you everything ahead of time.
In August, just a couple of weeks before you disclosed this massive hack, you said, and I want to quote you here, fraud is a huge opportunity for us. It is a massive, growing business for us. Now, Mr. Smith, now that information for about 145 million Americans has been stolen, is fraud more likely now than before that hack?
Yes, Senator, it is.
Yeah, so the breach of your system has actually created more business opportunities for you. For example, millions of people have signed up for the credit monitoring service that you announced after the breach. Equifax is offering 1 year of free credit monitoring, but consumers who want to continue that protection after the first year will have to pay for it, won't they, Mr. Smith?
Yes, Senator. The best thing a consumer can do is a lock product.
Okay, but they're going to have to pay after 1 year if they want your credit monitoring. And that could be a lot of money. So far, 7.5 million people have signed up for free credit monitoring through Equifax since the breach. If just 1 million of them buy just 1 more year of monitoring through Equifax at the standard rate of $17 a month, that's more than $200 million in revenue for Equifax because of this breach. But there's more. LifeLock, another company that sells credit monitoring, has now seen a 10-fold increase in enrollment since Equifax announced the breach. According to filings with the SEC, LifeLock purchases credit monitoring services from Equifax. And that means someone buys credit monitoring through LifeLock. LifeLock turns around and passes some of that revenue directly along to Equifax. Is that right, Mr. Smith?
That is correct.
That's correct. Okay, so from the second Equifax announced this massive data breach, Equifax has been making money off consumers who purchase their credit monitoring through LifeLock. So, look, you've got 3 different ways that Equifax is making money, millions of dollars, off its own screw-up. And meanwhile, the potential costs to Equifax are shockingly low. Consumers can sue, but it turns out that the average recovery for data breaches is less than $2 per consumer. And Equifax has insurance that could cover some big chunk of any potential payment to consumers. So I want to look at the big picture here. From 2013 until today, Equifax has disclosed at least 4 separate hacks in which it compromised sensitive personal data. In those 4 years, has Equifax's profit gone up? Mr. Smith?
Yes, Senator.
Yes, it has gone up, right? In fact, it's gone up by more than 80% over that time. You know, here's how I see this, Mr. Chairman. Equifax did a terrible job of protecting our data because they didn't have a reason to care to protect our data. The incentives in this industry are completely out of whack. Because of this breach, consumers will spend the rest of their lives worrying about identity theft. Small banks and credit unions will have to pay to issue new credit cards. Businesses will lose money to thieves, but Equifax will be just fine. Heck, it could actually come out ahead.
So let's just talk about what Senator Warren was actually talking about. And if I can just paint the picture in a different way, imagine this: if you actually had purchased a security from a alarm company, and that company actually allowed some thieves to, come in. In addition to that, they had said, all right, we'll actually, take care of everything, but pay us to actually, monitor it some more. So basically, it's almost like paying the thieves for doing what they were supposed to do in the first place. So that's definitely not a good situation, and Senator Warren is correct. Equifax has actually profited in multiple ways based off of this data breach, and the victims, even though they may have gotten a free year, they'll have to worry about this for the rest of their lives.
Crazy.
So let's talk about common types of identity theft. A lot of times, SSB Bank is actually pretty good as far as policies on protecting your information, protecting your bank account. But as far as financial, that's actually less than 30% of identity theft. Criminal, and we'll actually look at an example of how criminal identity theft can actually, affect you or affect others. I will say that when I was growing up, there was a version of this happening, but it was just more so called so-and-so committed a crime, they blame it on their brother and use their brother's name, and the brother takes the rap for it. It wasn't called identity theft at the time, but that's what it was.
Every time Stancy Nesby looks in the rearview mirror, she can't help but wonder if she's about to be pulled over.
Everybody needs to put themselves in my shoes and know that this could happen to them.
A 30-year-old single mom with 4 kids who holds 2 jobs working as a nurse's assistant, life was hard enough before her problems with police.
It's made it really hard for me to smile and be the normal person that I felt like I was at first.
It started 4 years ago when Stancy was pulled over for speeding in the Bay Area. She admitted going too fast, but couldn't understand why she was being arrested.
I ended up going to jail that day. They didn't believe anything I was saying.
It turned out Stancy had a warrant for her arrest. The police databases showed she'd been busted for cocaine possession here in San Francisco's seedy Tenderloin district back in 1999, but that she never showed up for court appearances. Stancy had to spend 3 days in jail. The problem, she was innocent. Police later confirmed it when her fingerprints didn't match the real suspect who had used Stancy's name.
I've had nightmares about this.
She says police told her they'd fix the problem, but 2 months later, Stancy was arrested again, this time at her home in Berkeley. Once again, she says when the officers discovered the error, they told her they'd help her clear her name. But 3 months later, Stancy was arrested again in yet another jurisdiction. And it didn't end there. From 2002 to 2004, Stancy was arrested or detained 7 times by 5 police departments. In one instance, hauled off right in front of her children.
The kids were crying. and basically they ended up, you know, throwing me on the ground and sticking their knees in my back.
So, definitely not the type of situation that you actually want. What do you do if you actually have a warrant served on you, served to you, and it wasn't something that you had did? Let's talk about the next area of identity theft, and that's employment. And this is actually a big one. Right now, to be able to get a job in the United States, you have to have a social security number, typically some type of ID. And there are, unfortunately, people who may want to work and don't have access to those things, or maybe people who would rather be someone else to be able to work. So let's just look at a brief example. Imagine if this had actually happened
Audra
to you.
Schmier has been a stay-at-home mom for 6 years. Now that her son's in school, she wants to return to work, so she applied to a temp agency.
They called me 3 or 4 hours later and said, Mrs. Schmier, I don't understand why you're applying. You already work here.
At a big tech company, a similar experience.
Here's my driver's license, my passport, my social security card. I gave him everything. And she said, well, really, how can you actually prove you're you? What if those people have the same documentation you do?
Schmier has discovered more than 200 illegal aliens throughout the United States are doing jobs Americans supposedly won't do by using her social security number. They work in fast food chains, cosmetic companies, even receive dividends from Microsoft.
I started to gather all this information and really found out how extreme the situation was. Scary.
Her ordeal began last year with a bill from the IRS for nearly $16,000 in back taxes for a job in Texas. She lives in Dublin, California.
My husband was actually quite upset. He asked me when I had ever been to Texas.
She tracked down the illegal alien whose phony tax return triggered the IRS bill. He told her he bought her social security number and a fake green card at this Texas flea market.
I don't understand how illegal aliens can come across here and commit a felony. Identity theft is a felony. And be excused from that felony to continue living their life when I cannot live my life.
By January, Schmier faced a $1 million IRS bill. She was temporarily detained by customs returning from a foreign business trip with her husband, and her Social Security account now shows a zero balance, erasing 14 years of work before her marriage.
Social Security right now sends me to IRS. IRS sends me to Social Security. Every now and then they'll send me to the FTC, whom I have a case with. No one wants to do anything about it. Right now, I have nowhere to go.
Schmier spends several hours a day trying to clear her name. The IRS has canceled her bill, but Social Security won't give her a new number. She says all 35 employers she's contacted have refused to take action against the workers using her number.
It's cheap labor, and they don't care.
Neither do most senators. John Ensign brought Schmier's case to their attention, and they still approved Social Security benefits for illegal aliens using stolen identities.
The crime of identity theft and Social Security fraud are not victimless crimes. The victims of these crimes are American citizens and legal immigrants.
Casey Wyand, CNN, Dublin, California.
So, it's not a victimless crime, and it can happen to anyone. With the medical situation, of course, we know a few years ago the big thing was healthcare, and healthcare is still a big issue right now. Unfortunately, it's made a big hole to where it's easy to actually steal people's medical information, but at the same time, it's hard to actually reverse it due to the HIPAA laws. Once you actually claim that you're not the person, then it can kind of lock you out. So, just looking at this young lady's situation.
You just would never imagine in a million years that something could happen like this.
Several months ago, Anne-Marie Sachs got an alarming phone call. Her newborn baby had just tested positive for illegal drugs. Problem is, Anne-Marie hasn't given birth in years.
As much as I denied it, they just kept insisting that yes, I was the mother of this child. There was nothing that I could say to get out of it.
To make matters worse, authorities showed up at her door the next day, calling her an unfit mother and threatening to take away all 4 of her kids.
When you know you're innocent and you didn't do anything wrong, it just absolutely, I I was in tears. I was a wreck.
Turns out, Andrew was the victim of medical ID theft. Someone had stolen her driver's license, walked into a hospital, and had a baby, leaving Andrew with a $10,000 bill and a fight to clear her name. Do you think it's a big problem?
It's a huge problem.
Chris Dorn is a fraud expert with Ingenix, a company that tracks medical ID theft cases. He says victims have more worries than just fraudulent doctor bills. Your medical records can also be altered, with the crook's information substituted for your own.
Inadvertently, your blood type can be changed, your medications that you're on that can be changed, your underlying medical conditions can be changed.
Which can be life-threatening.
Certainly.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
The other thing that I found is scary is that a lot of places actually still do use those physical files. So it's pretty much easy. And you figure, just thinking about those type of files, you would think that they would have the best security watching over it, but typically this is a low pay employee that may or may not like their job. Moving on to the other area, financial identity theft. Now, this is the area whenever you're talking about like credit card fraud, things like that. Typically, in most situations, like I said, SSB Bank, as long as you notify them within the legal parameters, they'll be able to help you out with that. But the driver's license identity theft, that's a big area. Just like with the character and criminal one, there's a lot of things that you can actually do with a driver's license. So just kind of imagine, who here was a teenager before? Absolutely. Now, don't raise your hands. Who might have had a fake ID? Just keep your hands up. You complete the fifth on that. But even if you didn't, everyone knows someone who's actually had one before. And if a teenager can get access to a fake ID, and these things are pretty good, I've seen some good ones, then think about what a professional thief can actually do. Last one is child identity theft, and before we actually look more into that, there are a couple things I wanted to highlight. Number one, I don't know if anyone's children have PlayStation Network or anything like that. There was a huge data breach on that, and the kids are typically just putting all sorts of information, and they're not really thinking about it. It's just that they're spending V-Bucks, they're inputting information for some sort of game. The games now are a little bit more than just you play with your friends. Now it's at the point where you play with the world. But who's to say that the person that they're playing with that's supposed to be 14 is really 14? And that's something that I actually worry about, because adults can manipulate kids, and if you can't actually see who's who, then you don't know who's who. So just keep that in mind. And
this morning on Today Investigates, the new twist on an old crime, identity thieves now targeting babies. NBC's Jeff Rossen is here with information the parents really need to know. Jeff, good morning.
Yeah, this is an important one, Ann. Good morning to you. I know your kids are in high school now, and so they're a little older for this, but for a lot of us younger parents, the question you have to ask yourself, when was the last time you checked your child's credit report? I know I haven't. I have two little girls. And the crooks know it. Now they're so advanced, they can actually steal your baby's social security number before they're even born, racking up millions in debt. This morning, we tracked down the alleged thieves and show you exactly how they do it.
Egan is only 2 years old, but already owes thousands in credit card debt and has declared bankruptcy.
You think this must be a joke, and then you realize, no, this is actually incredibly serious.
9-year-old Riley is in default on utility bills. Her social was stolen 11 years before she was even born.
As a mother, I was shocked and angry and violated.
Katie was only 3 years old when crooks stole her identity. Now, as a teenager, her credit report shows over $750,000 in debt, all at the hands of ID thieves. A scary thought for a young girl.
I think that because it is illegal, like they should be in jail.
But they're not. In fact, we found 2 men using her identity, living free.
Never in my wildest dreams had I thought to run a credit check on my son, and what parent would run a credit check on their child who's in diapers, who's crawling?
Stealing their socials is easier than you think. That number is actually a code. The first 3 digits stand for the state it was issued in. The last 6 digits stand for the approximate date it was issued. A clue to the person's birthday. Now, using simple software, crooks can actually predict kids' numbers, meaning when your newborn gets their number at the hospital, it may already be stolen, which is exactly what happened to Riley. Her mom discovered it years later by chance on a family credit check.
The government gave me a bum number that obviously they hadn't cleared. It's a financial birth defect. And the parents aren't warned.
And in many cases, police don't have the time or resources to catch these crooks.
What can parents do if they suspect their children's identities have been stolen?
Right, so if you do that credit check and it comes back that the identity is stolen, really only one thing you can do is immediately put a freeze on your child's credit, so that way it'll prevent any future theft. But it will take years for you to call the credit card companies and the credit bureaus. The burden is on you to prove that your identity has been stolen, and it is a major pain.
It is infuriating, Jeff Rawson. Thank you so much this morning.
Absolutely, and just to kind of share with you guys a personal story, I myself, when I was initially adding my children in, 3 out of 4 were fine. 1 out of 4, it ended up having a red flag, and it turned out that it was a mistake that happened in California. There was no applied credit or anything like that, but it could have ended up being something worse. So, some quick tips, and you have to watch out for these. Typically, phishing and farming scams, those usually happen through email. Sometimes it might happen on, to where there's a fake website that's put up. So typically, if you receive an email, for example, from a company, a lot of times you may want to make sure that you go to the company's actual website just to make sure that's actually it. Skimming, there are a couple of ways that can actually happen. It can happen through smartphones, but just thinking about an everyday thing, it can actually happen at a gas station. There are different devices that are put over the pumps to where if you actually put your credit card information in, they can actually get your information and use it later, as well as ATMs. So a lot of times it's recommended to kind of just shake the reader a little bit with your hand, just to make sure it's not removable or anything like that. As well as on the gas pumps, there's usually a certification seal that you want to make sure that seal's not broken. Caller ID spoofing, the thieves are getting pretty clever now, and they're actually telemarketers are kind of using the same systems to where they can actually make it appear as if they're calling from some type of local law enforcement office. Make it, usually it might have an area code of yours, and they're calling, saying that something happened and they need some sort of information just to make sure that everything's okay. And data breaches, as we had actually talked about earlier, that's the big one. That's the one that are actually out of your control, because this is pretty much other companies that are handling your data. And no matter what you do, as long as you're alive, your information's out there, whether through the school system, medical systems, anything, it's already out there. So if there's a data breach, and that's why I said that privacyrights.org, check on that frequently. So when identity theft started being noticed, there were 1 million companies that actually came out. All of them are not created equally. So just want to talk about how some of them work. Most of them do monitoring. Reimbursement plans, the way that usually works is that you pay everything to actually get your identity restored, which in most cases it can cost thousands of dollars as well as your time. And if you do everything right, then you may get your money or some amount of money returned. Fraud alert plans pretty much tell you if it happens. Restoration plans are the separator. Restoration means that somewhere along the line, either through them giving you a packet, or the company actually taking upon themselves actually restoring your identity. So it takes about 60 seconds to find out if you're a victim, 600 hours to restore your identity. Who has time to actually do that? Not me.
Not me.
143 million people affected. This is the significant of all the hurricanes coming together at one point.
This gentleman here, he actually works with our company. He's been featured on CNBC talking about the Equifax breach.
They need to start being very careful about watching.
Sir?
Yeah,
If
I've already
you're
done
on
it.
the affected list, you should freeze your credit with everybody?
Absolutely.
Okay, what's that cost and how do you do it?
Actually, if you go to the site that the Experian has put out, Equifax, has put out, they'll show you how to go through, and the FTC and everybody shows you how to do your credit freezes. Go to those sites. Usually it's about $10, to put the freeze on. But I would do that instantly right now for at least the next 60 days, just to let this thing play out.
So
Wait a second, you're talking about the next 60 days. This has already been out there for more than 30 days. So is it too late at this point?
It may or may not be, a lot of times when this happens, and this is actually a very good question. We've seen a lot of data be held for 4 years. This stuff doesn't go away. Your name, your social security number, your date of birth doesn't really expire. So this is great data that's going to be valuable, not just today.
This company is offering you insurance for the next year. Is that sufficient?
That's not. I mean, that is just using an eyedropper to put out a forest fire. That is not going to be sufficient enough. I mean, you're talking. Remember, when the LinkedIn data breach happened, they used passwords 4 years later, including Mark Zuckerberg, to compromise his account. So this data is, it's going to be out there for. It has
so
a
news
long
you can use.
shelf life.
Let's continue on. What other things if you're a viewer right now, concerned about your own security, what should you be doing? Online security.
Yeah, basically a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now concerns identity theft, but you should be looking at, is there any information in there that could be used to compromise your account, things that would indicate what your passwords are. Make sure you've got good, healthy systems set up for how to change your passwords. Make sure you've got, in addition to what they have, I've got my own identity theft protection. I just don't trust what they give me because all they do is the bare bones. The only thing they
When
need.
you say you have your own identity protection, through who? You don't necessarily have to tell us the company you're using, but who should you be using? What you would be doing?
Oh, look, anything is better than nothing. I use a company called ID Shield because one of the things they have is there's also some actual investigators. If anything happens, you actually have real investigators go out and do it. But you need something. You need something that's better than nothing. This is one of those things. This is hard to find out how this is going to play out because we don't know who the actors is. We've seen North Korea be behind WannaCry and the ransomware attacks. Is it possible it's them? Is it a state actor? Or is it organized crime? That's going to make a big difference on how your data is used.
All right, great. So one of the big things that Morgan was actually talking about is that ID Shield, our company, actually gives you licensed private investigators that actually go and restore everything in the event that something does happen. So let's talk about ID Shield real quick. We do offer monitoring, which that's definitely great, and we're looking at new credit, black market websites. We're looking at passports, emails, all sorts of personal data. But in the event that something happens, that's where that identity theft restoration actually happens. You actually sign unlimited power of attorney, and we do whatever it takes, however long it takes on your behalf to actually restore your identity. So ID Shield has a pretty cool mobile app that gives you access to your credit report, your credit score, as well as there is 24-hour, 7-day-a-week emergency service. So emergency would not necessarily be, I just had a question about my credit report. Emergency is more so there's a knock on my door, what do I do? Or I'm getting all these notifications about someone saying that there's a warrant or something of the sort. Those things 24/7. So just a little bit about the company we partner with. Kroll is actually the world's leading risk consulting firm. They're located in New York. 1972 they were actually founded. Jules Kroll, he's a former CIA agent. and operating in 33 countries, 65 cities, and they're pretty much the best of the best when it comes to identity theft monitoring. So, in addition to that, we have a partnership through our Legal Shield legal plan. In the event that most of the time, whenever identity theft actually happens, there may be a legal aspect. Identity theft is a legal issue. In those situations, we offer advice on limited personal legal issues, letters and phone calls written on your behalf, assistance with reviewing documents on your behalf, preparation of a last will and testament. We actually do that free of charge. Representation for removing traffic violations. We don't actually, we don't advise people to speed or break the law or anything like that. But what we do is, help to deal with the ongoing costs like points, things like that. In other areas, IRS assistance, things like that, we give you at least a 25% discount. And Legal Shield has its own mobile app. And we have a network of attorneys all over the country. And now, both of these services are available, but it's not necessary to get both of them. The identity theft protection is available, and we have a website, that's actually available on the SSB website. But for a family, you can actually protect the identity of a family for only $18.95. If someone did decide they wanted to add on the legal plan, it's only $38.90 for both plans together, and the plans cover up to 8 minors. So with that, and let me just give you the website real quick for those who are actually watching online. You can actually go on to www.legalshield.com/info, /SSB bank. If you go right onto that website, it will have all the information for you to be able to enroll. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. My name is William Thomas, and on the SSB website, you can fill out a form and they'll be able to get you to me. Thank you guys for your time, and thank you for watching this presentation.